Meaning of disinvestment. We use the word strategic disinvestment. So what is the meaning of strategic disinvestment? Well, that are different methods that are adopted worldwide in the disinvestment process. Then we will come to the Indian scenario, try to understand how the disinvestment process started in India, and then how the government started disinvesting. And in last, but obviously the most important part, what are the valuation methodologies that has been prescribed by the government in order to take up the valuation related to government companies which are in process of disinvestment. So that will be the flow chart, how we will be covering up the different topics, right? And it is very necessary to proceed in this particular flow chart only because I presume that you are not having exposure to disinvestment. I may be wrong because many of you might already be involved in that process. So by starting from the scratch, it will help to those persons who are not having much idea. So you should know what are the different processes involved, because this particular field of valuation is equally open to the SFA valuer as well as the asset valuer, because in this process, both the type of valuation are to be done. Interestingly, when we do the valuation, when the government gets the valuation done, it gets two separate valuation done. One is done for the business, one is the business valuation, and second is the asset valuation, and both valuers are different, right? So this topic is going to be equally interesting for both all the three asset categories. So we will just start from the scratch, have a good idea about the international practices, then come to the Indian parlance, understand the practices in India, and then how the present things are going on, right? So the first we need to understand is what is the meaning of disinvestment, right? So when the government intends to raise the fund by selling its ownership stake. Now, as we know, when there is a company is having shareholders. So in these companies, most of the shareholding is being held by the government. And when the government is selling that stake to generate funds, it is known as disinvestment. So it can be either in the form of, just a second. So it can be in the form of liquidation of an asset. That means entire asset is being liquidated and money is being raised, or some stake is being offered in the form of shares, right? Recent practice, the government that has been adopted by the government is to bifurcate the non-core assets from the company. Non-core asset means the assets which are not being involved in day-to-day operations. They are being spent off. They are being given to some other independent company, and remaining the company along with the core assets are being offered for the disinvestment. So that all we will just examine when we'll go to the different part of the this presentation. So the intent is to facilitate reallocation of fund or resources to better use. Now, when we talk about the disinvestment policy, what basically the core objective of disinvestment policy was? This disinvestment policy for India was initially created in the year 2001, then a revised came in year 2003, right? And the intent was that the government should not get involved in those sectors, which is actually can be efficiently managed by the private sector. Because whenever government is managing a company, the funds that are being used in that particular company, somewhere or other, belong to the public. Because how the government is paying salaries to those people, to those to those government undertakings, obviously. So the taxes that has been paid by the public or other sources of revenue, which is ultimately recovered from the public at large. So the intent is that in such companies, such organizations, which are not of that strategic nature, the government should take a back step, offer it to the private party, and let the private party handle it. Because it is expected, it is imagined that when private party comes into the picture, they are more tech savvy, they are more open to the modernization process. So it will be better managed, right? So the aim is to facilitate reallocation of fund or resources to better use or monetize asset, help in lowering debt and restructuring of business. Most of the government companies you can see are right now facing some losses, right? The debt structure is very disbalanced. So in order to lower the debt, to restructure, reorganize the business, the disinvestment process is undertaken. And obviously the increase in return on investment. So the objective of disinvestment is to reduce the financial burden on the government, because the government has to bear all the expenses that is related to that public sector undertaking. So when you disinvest it, you are no more under obligation to bear all those financial burdens. To improve public finances, to introduce competition and market discipline, to fund growth, to encourage wider share of ownership, and depoliticize non-essential services, which I was discussing in the start only, that where those sectors which are non-strategic sector, the government should take a back step. Now, three terms are interchangeably used in this process: disinvestment, divestment, privatization. Normal language, we use these three words interchangeably. We sometimes call it as disinvestment, sometimes we call it privatization, and sometimes we call it divestment. But there's a slight difference between these three terminologies. When it is a disinvestment, in an asset or division or stake, it is usually without the intent of reinvesting that capital into the same entity. So obviously by disinvestment, you are offering certain stake, you are selling off certain stake, in return you are getting some money, but the intent is not to reinvest that money you have received in the same entity. That is the concept of disinvestment. Divestment is to fight the temporary financial crisis, right? So it might be that the fund may be used for the balancing the tight financial situation. And privatization is basically partial or complete sale of government-owned assets to a privately held firm or a group of individuals, where the government gives up the majority control to the buyer of assets. So here, government is just wiping off their hands that, okay, we are giving it, we don't have any interest for them. So these are the three words, but in normal day-to-day language, we use them interchangeably. Now, this disinvestment strategy, what are the broad ways in which disinvestment is done? First is the minority disinvestment, where by name itself is clear that the majority of the stake is held by the government and minority is passed to the third party. Right? So that means, suppose out of 100%, if the government share is 100%, maybe 10 or 15%, 20% stake is being offered to the private party. So that is a minority disinvestment. Some efforts has been done in India, which include the offer for sale includes the Power Grid Corporation, Rural Electrification Corporation Limited, NTPC, NHPC, etc. Second is majority disinvestment, where majority stake is being offered to the outside party, to the third party. So after the disinvestment, the government is left holding a minority stake, just reverse of this part. So some examples are MRL to IOC, KRL to BPCL, means this KRL stake was offered to BPCL, means on part of government entity. Modern Foods to Hindustan Lever, and so on. Next comes the strategic disinvestment. When we talk about strategic disinvestment, which is as on date, most of the companies are being disinvested on strategic mode, where along with the stake that is being offered, the management control is also being transferred. Right? In other parts, what happens that only the stake is offered, but the government keeps the management part with itself. But here, management control is also offered to the third party. So obviously, now you have the control, and when we do the valuation, there is a very important aspect when which we assign in the form of control premium. So obviously, their valuation increases when the strategic disinvestment takes place, because here the control is also being transferred to the party who is taking the stake. So strategic disinvestment implies the sale of substantial portion of government shareholding of a central public sector enterprise, along with transfer of management control. Right? So recently Air India is the example of the strategic disinvestment. Complete disinvestment privatization means 100% sale of government stake in a PSU leads to privatization of the company. In this case, it may happen that some portion is still being retained by the government, though they are offering the majority part along with the management control. For example, if we see the case of recently a company named BEML, Bharat Earth Movers Limited, is also in the process of disinvestment, right? Where the government stake, the stake that is offered by the government is around 26%. So post that also, I think the total stake that is held by government is around 52 or 53%. So once that 26% is being offered to the public, then remaining is with the government, right? And along with that, they are also giving the management control. right? If you have an idea about the SEBI laws, 26% and above triggers the takeover code. So in that process, once a party takes the 26% stake, they have to also comply with the takeover code and by giving a public offer, right? So what I mean to say is that the difference between these two, the strategic disinvestment and complete disinvestment, is that in strategic disinvestment, majority stake is being offered, good quantum of stake is being offered along with the management control. Here, 100% is given to the third party along with the management control. Everything is given, right? So these are the basic strategies that are adopted by the government to do the disinvestment. Depending on the recommendation, we have Niti Aayog with us. So basically, these all things are monitored, means the plan is chalked out by the Niti Aayog. It is discussed with the ministerial IMG, the interministerial group. Then it is given, the task is given to the Department of Investment and Public Asset Administration. So that is the authority that is going to take care of the procedural aspects. Now, quickly, we will examine the worldwide practices that are being used for the purpose of disinvestment or divestment, because this is something which is happening all over the world. Government is withdrawing its participation in day-to-day activities, concentrating itself on the core activities, instead of just participating as a business entity in just every hanky-panky thing, right? So the different methods that are used, first is the strategic sale. A brief overview I have already given. In detail, we will discuss in the last, because that is going to be the main area where our concentration would be. And then we have the capital market methodology, where there are broadly 5 methods: offer for sale to public at a fixed price, offer for sale to public through book building, secondary market operation, international offering, then private placement. Then we have the auction method. Then we have warehousing. We will have a quick glimpse in the coming slides. Warehousing is one method, then reduction in equity buyback or conversion, then trade sale, asset sale, management employee buyout, cross sale, or sale through demerger or spinning off. So these are the different methods that are being used worldwide for doing the disinvestment. Quickly having a glimpse on the different methodologies that are being used. First is the capital market, where the first method is offer for sale to public at a fixed price. That means the price is pre-decided. Obviously, it will be at a discount to the market, because otherwise no one will come to buy it, right? So it is at a discount to ensure success and immediate capital appreciation for the investors. The target is usually mixed of retail and wholesale. Some part is kept for the small investor. However, the transaction cost is high, right? So it ranges somewhere to 2 to 5%, depending on what is the size of your issue. We know that all these methodologies depend on the quantum of the issue that you are offering. Time involved is also say around 3 to 4 months, and it is very strictly regulated by SEBI stock exchange requirements, etc. However, it is successful only in case where you can expect that a small investor will be interested. That means you should be a profit-making entity, right? And the investor should expect that if they subscribe to offer for sale, they are going to get immediate capital appreciation along with obviously some good returns in the future. So one of the example in India was about the BSNL, which was offered at the rate of 750 rupees per share. So here the method is that the government sells the shares to the public at large at a pre-decided price. An offer document is placed. Equity shares can be accompanied by sweeteners like warrants that give an added advantage. If you know, the warrants are things that can be converted in future to the shares. Issue amount is thus automatically obtained. Issue underwritten by syndicate members. It is not mandatory. Advantages is that it ensures broad-based shareholding, because you are involving the retail shareholders, retail investors, wholesale investors, along with the small investors. So you get a good market, good widespread market you have in front of you. Valuation benchmark for future fundraising is set up. At what price the shares are being offered, that serves as a benchmark for future fundraising. Then comparatively 3 to 4 months, it is a quick method, we can say, because in the process of government disinvestment, usually the duration runs into years, right? So it is comparatively a quick method. However, disadvantage is that it is highly linked to the capital market condition. If the capital market crashes, obviously it is going to impact heavily this offer for sale. Right? And you have to do a lot of regulatory compliances because it is regulated by SEBI and stock exchanges.